Well, welcome. Tonight we're going to visit one of the hidden gems in Milford. Um, you don't really appreciate what Claflin Hill brings until you participate. And if you enjoy the symphony, if you don't, you should try it out. But going into Boston and having to budget to attend a concert that I'd say we have equal quality here. The Boston Symphony is the Boston Symphony.
That's right.
The pops are the pops. But personally, I had more fun driving 2 minutes down to Main Street, getting to know the people in the orchestra, and being with all my neighbors than I did going all the way into Boston, spending a fortune, and having the hassle of driving in and parking. But let's start with an introduction before we get to.
I thought I was going to have to introduce myself. Paul Serpine, founding executive and artistic director at Claflin Hill. Nice to be back with you, Al, in the studio. And we're about to launch our 26th season of Claflin Hill Symphony. And what you just said about the difference between something like going to a Boston Symphony, which is, going on 150 years almost in age, and Claflin Hill, part of it is the local appeal and the local ownership of something like that. This past season, in our 25th anniversary season, as you know, we had a little bit of a fiscal crisis, which was several years in the building, but finally came to a peak point where we had to, confront a reality and make a hard decision to cancel one of the concerts on our anniversary season so that we didn't go beyond the total capitalization of the orchestra as a company. You can sustain debt, based on always thinking optimistically toward a better day. But at some point you have to be realistic and realize there's a certain tipping point which there's no coming back from. That decision actually inspired our Legacy 25 campaign, which succeeded in bringing our season to a truly triumphant ending. And that was actually inspired by one person who immediately got first word of this concert cancellation and sent us an email saying if her and her husband offered to give $10,000 to the orchestra right now, would that help the orchestra? And of course it was like, yes, it would. Thank you very much. It won't save that concert, but we translated that into a stimulus campaign, which, in the end of 2 weeks, we had more than doubled her gift. And it went on to bring our Legacy 25 campaign to, a success. We had a goal of bringing in 50,000 new dollars in through the spring into the end of the fiscal year, and we did do that. But one thing, this friend of the orchestra, her name is Maxine Jonas, when she was communicating with us about that, and really I wasn't familiar with her name at first. It was kind of in the back of my head, like I know this name, but I'm not quite sure what. She's not on the major donor list at the moment, so this is coming out of left field. And then when I looked up her name before I called her on the phone the next day, I realized I knew her because she had called the office in October to buy a season ticket, and she was from Charlestown. And I said, wow, you're coming all the way out from Charlestown to a symphony season in Milford. That's very nice. You live next door to the center of the greatest culture in the world, really. And, thank you for coming to visit us. And she had a friend in the orchestra, which was what led her to us in the first place. But then, as she was writing about her experience at Claflin Hill, she said basically the same thing, that coming to a Claflin Hill Symphony Orchestra concert, it was like coming into a beautiful historic space, which is warm and friendly. The rules are simple. and you immediately feel embraced and part of a community in a way that you never get by going to those anonymous and transactional kind of presentations in Boston.
Well, it reminded me of 4th of July.
Yeah.
We've had these debates all along about the Milford 4th of July celebration. One year I decided we should go to Boston. So we rented a hotel room at extortion prices. We went in, and the fireworks were outstanding, the music was outstanding, but it was cold. I couldn't walk over and try and sneak a hot dog around my darling bride's vigilance from John Accavelli at the Lions Club.
Right.
You know, it's Keith Katawzi wasn't there to say hello to. We didn't walk around and see all our neighbors on blankets.
Right. And I mean, when you're at a Claflin Hill Symphony concert in our amazing, beautiful hall, I mean, sometimes we're late starting the concert, partly because everybody's in the hall. They haven't taken their seats because they're all kibitzing with all of their friends. And then intermission sometimes goes to a half hour because everybody's so busy celebrating with each other.
But that's what made it
And that's
fun.
what music is. That's what that hall is. It's Claflin Hill, in its essence, is more than a great orchestra. It's more than just a gig for musicians, and it is that, and that's why we started it, to create a workplace for professional musicians so that our art form doesn't die. But also, it's more about the community of the orchestra amongst themselves. It's a family atmosphere in our orchestra. They all like each other. They all love each other. They support each other. And then they're connected with the audience. They feel that love.
Well,
and they know this.
Going to
audience.
Boston, I don't think I'd ever get to know Angel and his mother and all the family.
No.
You know,
and know their stories, of which, we could have an entire mini-series about who are these people of the Claflin Hill Symphony Orchestra. It's, they're immigrants who came here to study music and became Americans. They're teachers in our school systems. They're raising their own families. I started family night at the bandstand in a way because I wanted my kids to be able to run around in the park while daddy's playing on the bandstand, and and all of their kids and my neighbors could come watch.
But that had to be an incredible sense of pride when your son played in the orchestra.
Yes, and now he's the personnel manager and has even conducted it several times.
Oh.
So, yeah, he conducted, actually last year's season opener, he came out and conducted the overture with the Mozart Magic Flute. He had actually conducted that with our youth orchestra prior to COVID. He's a trained musician. He's an orchestra director at Whitensville Christian School. He's an excellent professional violinist and really a studied musician. I mean, in a way, more than I am, And, I wanted to give him an opportunity to assert himself in some role in the orchestra into the future. I don't know what that will be, but as the musicians, he has to learn somehow. So where else better? I learned how to conduct by being the conductor of this orchestra in a way, I mean, he probably has more training in that than I did when I started it. But the funny thing is that, as we're getting ready for the concert that day, I said, by the way, you're going to go out first, bow, conduct the overture. After you get done, I want you to turn around, greet the audience, acknowledge all of our corporate sponsors for the evening, welcome them to the 25th anniversary season, and say a few words about how, maybe you were here on the first night years ago as a little kid, but you were playing cards with your friends in the back room or something. I mean, it was cute. And he didn't want to do that at first. And I said, well, if you can't talk to the audience, then you really can't be a musician to the audience. I mean, it's all communication. And so he did that. And Susan and I were sitting under the side balcony, in chairs, waiting for me to be introduced. And we were sitting there bursting with pride. I mean, he was funny. And he was charming. And the audience immediately, came to him, they connected with him. And it was like, yeah, that's good. That's good, I mean, this is something we're building for all of us.
Well, I mean, all the way back, oh God, I'm dating myself, to the Tenors concert.
Yeah, yeah, my
You,
brother and
you're,
his buddy.
all of a sudden, that's Paul's brother up there, and that's his friend up there. And you immediately felt a little closer than going into Symphony Hall in Boston. And I won't take anything away from them.
No, no, as well we shouldn't. I mean, they are what they are. And by the way, they didn't exist at one point, and then suddenly they existed. And it came to almost, if you know the story of how the Boston Symphony came into being, it's kind of like the story of a angel that suddenly appears. And then in Boston, it was in the form of Colonel Henry Higginson, who in 1880 decided, he was an industrialist, financier, had many successful businesses. He was well off. He and his wife traveled to Europe frequently, to see the continent, experience great culture. And he decided that Boston should have an orchestra. And so he totally funded it himself.
Wow.
And he made himself in charge of hiring, conductors and musicians. He had specific things that he wanted them to play. He didn't want modern music. He liked, the warm, rich sounds of classical music as we are accustomed to in the great halls of Europe. And whatever took place through those first 50 years of the orchestra, if they ran a deficit, he paid it off every year. And they were well paid, and they were great musicians. They used all the local musicians they could from the Boston area, and they engaged, conductors from Europe at the time. There was no really native-born future Leonard Bernstein yet on the scene. But that's how it came to be, and it was kind of like he decided he wanted something for his own community, and he was going to make it happen. And that's kind of what we've done as a community with
Kind of like
Claflin
Paul
Hill.
Serpine and Claflin Hill.
Yeah, except I don't have millions of dollars. And, and we haven't, we're still looking for that gigantic angel. Sometimes they happen. The Groton Hill Vista Philharmonic, which used to be the Indian Hill Symphony. I mean, they had basically the backing of one major corporate sponsor, Sterilite, for the first 50 years of their existence. And that's a very big company, and that was their big charity. And, we need something like that, especially in the corporate side and going into the next 25 years.
Well, I don't think people understand how important the corporate sponsorships are to the arts.
Without it, they don't exist.
Because, well, back when it was $25,000, $30,000 a concert, it's got to be more than that to put a concert on now.
Yeah, it's over 30,000 when you consider the payroll for a week of rehearsals and a concert, rental of music, venue fees and things like that. There's all sorts of, behind the scenes costs that nobody ever realizes that, we're responsible for before the musicians even show up. Our musicians are decently paid, but we're at the lower to mid spectrum right now of regional orchestra compensation.
But it still amazed me at the dedication the Claflin Hill musicians had. When the early days, I remember back when, well, guys, maybe in a month I can pay you, or?
Yes. No, well, a lot of them, I think from the beginning realized when they came to this, whatever was their first time, maybe sometimes somebody came in as a sub in the violin section. They had no idea what they were walking in on. It was probably going to be a less than rewarding, regional community orchestra kind of gig. But then they get in there and they listen to everybody around them and realize, I mean, the other night we gave a concert in Holliston with the Summer Winds, and I had a sub in the trombone section. He's played a couple of times this summer with us, and he sent me an email yesterday after the Holliston concert saying, thank you so much. It's been such a blast playing with this group this summer. I really enjoyed myself, and it's just really an amazing group of musicians to play with. And he fit right in and did a great job. I mean, he'll be back. He'll be on the list. When we need somebody, there's somebody that has the right attitude, who has the spirit.
But one way or another, you got to come up with $75,000, $100,000 worth of corporate a year to survive.
Yeah, good question. I mean, back in the days when we first started out, within the first, like, say, 10, 15 years, we built quite a substantial, for our size orchestra, corporate sponsorship, list of business partners. And at the time, it was like maybe our income budget consisted of about $100,000 at tops in the best year of corporate sponsorships. And maybe private donations were a little more than half of it at the time. In the years to follow, it shouldn't be that disparate. I mean, it should at least be equal. I mean, private donations continue to raise each year. But corporate sponsorships have been dwindling. I mean, this year we barely brought in $50,000 in corporate sponsorships. Meanwhile, private donations topped this year for the first time ever $150,000. Now that's great, but when you're dealing with private donations, that depends on how everybody's doing privately year to year. And one result of this this crisis this year was that a lot of our existing donors stepped up their gift, either double or additional gifting, to bring that total much higher. And I think maybe for some of them, maybe they realize, this orchestra is so amazing, and they all agree on that. And maybe they just assume because we continue to give concerts and they continue to be amazing, and the presentation is so terrific when you're in the room. I mean, it looks like, wow, they got it together. This is like really successful and a done deal. And suddenly maybe they came to the realization it's fleeting. It could all disappear in a piff,
Well,
And so that's good, but we need to work
a season
on.
ticket to Claflin Hill is less than I would spend going to one concert in Boston.
Yeah, yes. I mean, actually, just a couple of days ago, I was meeting with Wayne Stockwell, who does a lot of our IT things and sets up all the online platforms for ticketing and, things like
And
that.
Bernadette does
And
everything
Bernadette-
else.
And Bernadette does everything else. And we were looking at what the pricing could be this year. And, there's a minor increase, but when we looked at all the other orchestra concert ticket pricing in the area, we're still less than half of that cost. I mean, a season ticket is almost, like you said, the price of one ticket for one person for a season. And I'd rather keep it that way, increase it slowly, but bring more people into the room. Increase your treasure by just bringing more people
Well,
and making more affordable for more people to
I
be part of it.
remember the first concert I went to, the hall looked half empty.
Yeah, there were
20-some
like
years
that.
ago. And then all of a sudden, the last few years, you wonder, is it sold out?
Holiday Pops is usually pretty close to or is a sellout, and that's great. Someday I'd like to be able to do 2 or 3 nights of Holiday Pops if possible. I mean, but even the classical programs have been building steadily. We have a nice box office sale on all of them. We're bringing new people who actually came to it because they suddenly discovered there is an orchestra that plays Beethoven and all of the great classics, and all the other things that we do really wow them. And then that way you're building an audience that will actually be loyal, and they'll bring even more friends that they know too.
But it's such a wonderful mixture, because I never listened to Dvorak till I went to one of your
Really?
concerts. And it was just all
Well,
of a
you'll
sudden,
get to hear it this November because we're going to do the New World Symphony.
oh, wow.
That got canceled on that cancellation concert, but we're going to start the next 25 years of Claflin Hill this fall, and we're going to finish off Unfinished Business.
So what's coming up this season?
Um,
Have you decided yet? Or?
oh yeah, we've got the programming set. I think it's up on the website now, and then as soon as we're got all of our online ticketing apparatus tweaked and up and running, we'll be able to start selling tickets at the end of August. But and that's one topic that we were just talking about. We launched a podcast last week that we're going to continue as a series of, conversations. We'll have guests from the people from the audience, people from the orchestra to talk about various other parts of Claflin Hill, behind the scenes things. And this past one was like, how do you decide what we're going to play this year?
Well, that's a fundamental question that
Yeah.
I want to ask.
Sometimes I don't know. It's like, as I said, it's like being a head chef of a restaurant, and somebody told you have to plan all of the specials for the next 10 months, and all the menus for your restaurant 10 months out. And sometimes I'm not quite sure what I want to eat next week, let alone next month. But usually I start with a couple of little ideas of things that we haven't touched on yet, pieces we would like to play, sometimes things that are pretty adventurous that maybe the audience is ready to hear those.
Yeah, but Claflin Hill has a reputation of not doing one concert, but of somehow getting 2 concerts worth of material into one night.
Yes, and I hear that from the musicians after a long, tiring evening, we'll be down at the Sorrento after the concert having our little post-concert get-together and buffet, and, there's a couple of the guys and they'll say, Paul, that was a long concert, I mean, they played it magnificently, but they were like, And then some nights it'll be one that's like the usual standard orchestra size length, and then there'll be, that was a nice concert. It was perfect. They weren't stressed. But stress is good for them, I think, sometimes. It makes them play harder. But, so this summer I started planning out things. I kind of thought maybe we'd like to do the Dvorak. It's one of the most popular symphony pieces ever written, a top 5 of the classical hit list, Dvorak's New World Symphony. So, and the musicians love playing it. So we'll start with that. And then one of the musicians, our principal oboist, Sashko Murato, came to me and said it's been her dream to play the Richard Strauss oboe concerto. And she'd like to do it before her parents have passed on. And they live in Japan. And she would make arrangements to get them here.
Oh, wow.
And, she's such a magnificent player and has such a great heart. And when you see her playing, I was just watching it the other night. I was watching on MTV the season finale recording again. And when I tuned in, it was in the middle of an oboe solo. And I'm watching her and thinking, God, she puts her whole body and soul into this instrument and sings. And I said, okay, I think that would be great. I mean, you deserve to be given a spot like that, and I'd like to do something so that you could do something for your parents. And, so that's kind of all of a sudden it's like, well, that's a perfect program, the Strauss Oboe Concerto. and the Dvorak, and we're going to open with an interesting little Charles Ives piece. It's like about 5 minutes long. It's called The Unanswered Question. And Ives was a sort of modernist, way ahead of his time. He was from Connecticut. He kind of dabbled in composition before, he was an insurance executive, actually, in New York City. And he came from Danbury, Connecticut. And some of his music was really out there, cacophonous. I mean, it was very constructed, but way ahead of his, like 20th century, modern music. He later was awarded a Pulitzer Prize, when they finally realized some of the stuff that composers in the 20th century were doing. This guy already had started it in the 1880s, so he got recognized. But this piece is actually very tonal and meditative. It's just a very beautiful string kind of meditation that features a trumpet solo, which sends out this trumpet call. Like bom 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 bom, something like. I'm not singing in pitch, but it's like a question mark phrase, and then 4 flutes answer it. And at first it's like a little garbled, lost in translation, you might say. It's like, oh, I didn't get that. What'd you say? And then it goes back to this very beautiful, eerie and mysterious string chorale. And then the trumpet sounds the question again. And the flutes answer. And then it gets more confusing. And this goes on several times, So in a way, it's like the unanswered question of life, which in the end remains unanswered. But it's a beautiful little opener. I thought it was kind of appropriate to just the philosophy of life, running an orchestra even, or starting one, or any of our lives. What's the meaning of life? I don't know yet. We'll find out. So that's the opener. Holiday Pops, I kind of worked together with the staff at the Greater Milford Community Chorus to see what they're working on for the holidays. And
That's got to be a tough concert because it's kind of like a famous rock musician. I remember we went to see the Elton John concert, and he wanted to do his new album. And he prefaced it by saying, I know you want the oldies, but we're going to do our new album first. Then I promise I'll do the old ones. How do you change Holiday Pops to keep it interesting for the musicians?
Well, I mean, yeah, that is a good question. But also, what is Holiday Pops? It really is something that we don't want to really change too much, because that's what we're looking for in the holidays. It'd be like changing the menu at Thanksgiving. How would that go over? I mean, there are things that people come every year to Holiday Pops to experience with us, and they do that because they know it and they love it. And if you took some of those things out, they'd be very upset.
Well, the Steel's knocked.
Yes, that.
How could you? That always had such an emotional appeal. It's like it reached into your soul as you played it.
It does. And it's almost like a religious moment for the entire orchestra and audience congregated in the end of that evening. It reminds me of a story. One of our principal musicians was telling me about playing a Holiday Pops with another professional orchestra in the region, maybe last year or the year before, and he said, it didn't quite have the same feeling. I mean, it was very good and well done, but he said, and they did Stille Nacht, but it was kind of like in the middle of the program, and it wasn't like it was anything special. It was just, oh, and now we're going to do this piece. How do you like it? Okay, and then on to the next. For us, Holiday Pops, we craft that program. You start with a big, Broadway type curtain raiser. It's the holidays. Joy to the world. You get it going right on. Actually, we start with a meditative, like a carol, like the Coventry Carol or O Come, O Come Emmanuel, something in darkness And then bang, the lights go up and we do that big Broadway opener. And then there's things like, the sing-along and sleigh ride and maybe some of the Christmas movie soundtracks. And, we have got other things that we cycle through every couple of
Well, the
years
thing that hit me was there comes a point where you know who's going to show up, and everybody's looking at the kids in the audience
to see the reaction
to
when
see their
Santa
faces
comes through
when
the
Santa
door.
comes through the door.
Yeah. But the whole thing is actually geared to the end of the concert, so at about 10 of 10, all of a sudden we darken the hall and we do Stille Nacht. So all of the excitement and the up and down, tempos of the pieces have all been building to this moment, which is really the quintessential moment for us all of holiday pops. And the orchestra, it's a simple piece, right? I mean, how hard is it to do Silent Night? And yet, to do that Stille Nacht in the Mannheim Steamroller arrangement of it, which is striking and beautiful, and in a thing like you never really hear it done, it's like you're chasing the perfect chrysanthemum blossom.
It's like every note,
Yes.
every single note you
Is
can feel.
got to be perfect. And, our orchestra feels it too.
And we've all heard Silent Night played 100 different ways and doesn't have the same appeal.
No.
And I can't explain it because I'm not a musician, but it just reaches into your soul.
And that's what musicians, that is our highest vocation or charge. If you're really not doing that as a musician, then you're not a very good musician. You can make a wrong note, you can crack a note, you could do whatever. There is no such thing as a perfect concert, but if it has the energy and the heroic, drive to succeed and to do these hard programs that we do, and that it touches the audience and if we're doing something like a Mahler symphony, and it's gigantic.
That's intense.
It's like, watching 60 people climb Mount Everest in a blinding blizzard, But suddenly they get to the top and the sun comes out and they're standing there with their arms all up in the air together, and all of the audience around them feel the same thing. Because I always thought of this, when you go to the circus, you're not going there to see a guy on a high wire, 6 inches off the ground. He probably takes the same concentration and the same sense of balance and perfection to do it. But when he's up in the air 2 stories doing it, now you're with him. Watching Nick Wallenda that time cross the little Grand Canyon,
But it amazes me because
But we do it in that sense, and everyone is elevated together.
I remember after the Shostakovich piece, we talked about it, and you said, well, we could have done this differently or that. And if you asked me, I couldn't tell that there was a flawed note throughout the whole performance.
Yeah.
And you could figure it out, but it was so impressive.
Yeah, and I think earlier on, starting the orchestra and attempting these programs as, an orchestra conductor, in one sense, when you do some of these big things, you realize, what it takes going into it, and especially the budget is a big thing. And one time I was tearing at the orchestra during a rehearsal saying, it cost me $30,000 to put this on. I don't want to have to do it again because we didn't do it well enough. It's like, this is my last shot at doing this. But now I don't really think that way anymore, because if we do the piece in the energy of human triumph like that we should do, and maybe there is a little blood on the floor when we get done, it's triumphant in that way, and that's even much more effective. The audience can realize that perfection is not
The
really
first concert you ever
human.
did,
Yes. Which one?
The very first Claflin Hill concert.
You want me to remember it? Or?
Yes.
Well, the first one was, the season opener, or not the season opener, but the actual birth of the symphony, which was on May 7th in the year 2000. And we did Carmina Burana, the big orchestral chorus thing. It's also in like the top 10 popular pieces. We
And
just finished the season with it this past year.
I was going to say, and when you repeated it, because you always said you're only going to play it once, but did anybody know that that was the second time you did it?
Actually, this year when we did it was the third time.
Third time.
Yeah, it was the third time. And yeah, I guess so, but in a way, it's also a benchmark for the orchestra, too. When you return to things, I mean, we've done Beethoven's Fifth Symphony 3 times, but those are things you do every couple of years anyways, partly because the audience wants to hear them every couple of years. But I sat in the balcony at the season finale because Holly Kraft, the founder of the New World Chorale, was on the podium. And, I said, you know this piece. I don't need to spend 2 months learning it. You already know it. You're training the chorus in it already. You deserve to be on the podium and lead it because you've already put all the work into it. And it's really a chorus piece anyway. So, the chorus is going to respond better to her because they know her than to me, who's fresh to the piece. But I sat in the real balcony with my wife through that whole second half watching this orchestra perform, and I was amazed. I was proud, but I was amazed at just this thing is happening here. Imagine this in this hall in Milford. I mean, who could imagine something of this scale and scope could actually exist?
Well, it
And,
starts
but why shouldn't it?
the hall itself. It amazes me, the acoustics in the hall.
Yeah, well,
Because
it's a simple thing, actually, acoustics, It's like, it's a big rectangle box. It's got a hardwood floor, which is great for sound. It's got 2.5-story ceilings. It's got, balconies and a rear balcony. It's got chandeliers. It's just a smaller model of Symphony Hall in Boston, really. And the orchestra can sound great in a space like that. I mean, it's designed really for orchestral concerts, whether or not the builders of Milford Town Hall thought of that back in the 1850s.
I was
but
going to say, when it was built, I don't think having a Claflin Hill Symphony in there was on the top of their design list.
maybe not, but it did quickly become the scene of things like that, going back to the days of, the Italians coming to Milford to cut rock, and they started an opera society and, put on
Well,
concerts.
some of the names that are associated with musical tradition in Milford, Boots Mazzulli.
Yeah.
You start looking back. This town has a rich musical history.
Yes, it does. And that's another thing, when you're thinking about, like life and the unanswered question is like, how did I come to be here? It's, it's what makes me think, there definitely is a God and a guiding force in our lives. You can admit it or not admit it, you can poo-poo it, but there's too many weird things about my life that are more than just a funny little coincidence, that I could just by chance buy a house in a town called Milford that I had never heard of and had only been to once because, I went to the Music Nook and, when I first got
With
married
Ronnie
to buy some
Pagnini.
clarinet reeds, Ronnie Pagnini, and thought, well, the town looks a little stressed. Plywood was up on a lot of the storefronts, and, this was like 1990 or something like that. 2 years later, we end up buying a house there. And then I find out, well, actually, this town has this, like, 100-year heritage of great music. I mean, I met a neighbor one day across the fence in, my neighborhood, and he introduces himself and said, "What do you do?" And I said, "Well, I'm a professional musician." He said, "Ah, yeah, there are a lot of musicians in Milford." I thought, yeah, right. Everybody that owns an accordion thinks they're a musician. Really, I didn't know. And then I start learning the history, and it's like, holy cow. I mean, somebody couldn't have come and started an orchestra in some other town that wasn't like Milford.
But Paul, some of the names, like, I remember showing up for one of the Claflin Hill concerts, and I was just amazed that the fellow who performed at my junior prom, Jerry Seco,
Jerry Seco.
was still there.
Yes. Yes, and he's still arranging, and he's working on he's finishing up a CD right now.
Oh, wow.
I mean, he's in his 90s. And he can't get around very well, but, every time I call Jerry to say hi, he's like, "Hey, I'm still alive."
But it just amazed me because there's the guy that I saw at my junior prom, all of a sudden is up on stage.
Playing with the orchestra. I mean, we've done concerts that he arranged all of the music for that symphony concert. Like we did a Sinatra symphony concert one night. He did all the charts for the Sinatra music because you couldn't find them to rent. The stuff that Frank Sinatra did years ago with Nelson Riddle and his orchestra. I mean, classic stuff. If you, his album Reprise from the 60s, that's really what I wanted. I wanted to perform basically the Reprise playlist from that album. And Jerry listened to that and took down all of the notes from the recording and wrote out orchestra parts according to what he heard on the recordings, and we played that. And he did a rock and roll concert for us once. And
How do you
we've
balance,
got a little surprise planned this year too to pay tribute
balance
to Jerry.
traditional music versus, I don't want to call it pop music, but the more contemporary? Because you've done concerts where it was just fun music.
Well, like movie soundtrack concert
Yeah.
nights. Yeah, but I mean, it's not really like the orchestra turns their nose up at it. It's a lot of fun to do that stuff. And really, when you're playing pop music, really good pop music, or things like movie soundtracks, what the audience, maybe doesn't even realize, but when they go to a movie, they're going to a symphony concert. I mean, the soundtracks are actually based on all the great classic composers. John Williams, you could pick out about 4 or 5 different composers. I mean, by the way, we're talking about New World Symphony. The Jaws theme? He took that from the opening of the 4th movement of New World Symphony.
Oh, really?
Those 2 notes. Ba-dum, da-dum. That's how the New World Symphony 4th movement begins. Da-dum, dum, 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 dum. I mean, it's almost verbatim. And John Williams even admitted he wanted something that would be ominous, short, effective, and every time you heard it, you immediately going to raise your feet off the floor.
Get out of the water.
You're like, and there's moments where he sounds like Igor Stravinsky, and moments he sounds like Gustav Holst. And he's a great composer. And all composers are influenced by previous composers anyway, so it's not like plagiarism. But, you can hear Brahms music, German Romantic, and hear things where, yeah, that's Beethoven. Yeah, he's what do you call when you're like transferring from, the occult, I forget the word right now, but he's feeling Beethoven right now, as if Beethoven's talking to him through his music. And so balancing it, it's not really that hard. And now and then we like to do one that's just strictly like heavy-duty symphony repertoire, sometimes something like, the concert in February we did with the Mahler 5 and a Strauss Death and Transfiguration tone poem. I mean, that was kind of for the orchestra, but the audience were amazed by it. And we actually had a good ticket sale, imagine that, for Mahler, And the season, I was just,
But Mahler's heavy to begin with.
it is. It is, but it should be heard. And when you sit back, and really, it's like a movie soundtrack. I mean, if you close your eyes and you're listening to one of these great symphonies, it's basically close your eyes and imagine you're making up your own movie storyline right now as you're hearing that piece of music. And that's the experience you're going to have. It's really a narrative of emotion and experience. And, usually always ends triumphantly, like the end of a good movie, and everybody, goes off into the sunset happy. So, I mean, it's just fun to do things like that and to figure out new things you can bring
I'm
to the
glad
audience.
you're doing podcasts because there's so much behind the music. When you look at some of the composers that the Germans held out as supporting their movement, and then you find out, no, it was making fun of it.
Yes. Well,
Yeah.
like you were talking about the Shostakovich Symphony in particular, Stalin thought that Symphony Number 5 was a great evocation of the
A
triumph of the
justification of the
Soviet
Soviet
system,
rule. And then you find out, no, it was
No, it was actually a triumph of the human spirit over
the Soviet.
totalitarianism. And then he wrote a 10th symphony that we did a couple of years ago, which was his statement after Stalin was safely dead and could not send him to the gulag any longer. And that was another one of the peak moments in the history of Claflin Hill performances. That was a very heavy and dark symphony because, it opened with this almost like, and I said to the audience, imagine Europe just standing in the middle, anywhere in Europe, a town, a village, a field, the day after World War II, and there's still a pall of smoke everywhere and the smell of death. And that's what that piece opened like, and the movement builds and builds, and becomes almost oppressive. And then in the end, it fades away. And two of the movements end like that, with the only thing as it fades into this sort of dark aura is the sound of two piccolos chirping away. And I always thought of them as two birds up in a dead tree singing. And so Stalin, Shostakovich was making an emotional statement as a human being of what it had been like to experience this awful, oppressive system. And now it's gone, we hope.
And the lights come on and the sun rises and the birds are singing.
Begin, sweet world, the day begins again.
You start again.
You start again. I mean, that's life.
Pretty amazing that he got away with what he did in his music for as long as he did.
Well, yeah, because a lot of artists in that time, poets, playwrights, the guy who wrote Dr. Zhivago, Boris Pasternak, I mean, you couldn't even find that book in Russia. It was like forbidden. If you had a bootleg copy of Dr. Zhivago in the Soviet Union, you could be arrested, and sent out to Siberia. So, and the same thing, sometimes artists are allied with certain things by mistake, and they get tainted by that, I mean, during Nazi Germany, Richard Strauss, actually, whose piece we just played this past year, was I think, proclaimed in Nazi Germany as the conductor or composer laureate, or, that was his official title. He was like almost 100 years old at the time. He didn't really know anything about politics.
Well, the music that described Siberia, described the spirit. I mean, the first time I went to Novosibirsk, in the middle of Siberia, I didn't know what to expect. It was in the middle of the Soviet Union. We're landing. It's cold as all get out. But the people, the spirit of the people, just was amazing.
Yeah, and I think in the end, when you look at things like that, or any other thing that we go through, it's always comes down to just the spirit of the common people. You know, it's a great country. You know, it's a beautiful country, artistically, culturally. You know, some of the greatest things in the human race have come out of Russia or Germany or any other place that maybe is tainted by some other political system. But really, the people are just like our people in the end, you know? One American meets one Russian, they find out, you know, hey, they both like the same things and they both complain about the same things, you know? So, and music is the great connector in a way. You know, when we give a Claflin Hill concert, as Maxine Jonas said in her little email, you know, all the rules are simple and everyone is just part of a larger community with nothing brought from the outside. It's just about this. It's just about experiencing great human art and being a community together. And I think in the end, that's the Claflin Hill difference. You know, if you get too big, you get too corporate, you start to, of a
Well,
necessity, put aside that kind of
What
thing.
you said was profound, that the concerts get delayed a few minutes because people are mingling, they're talking. The intermission gets expanded because you look out as the leader of this crew and you realize that the Testacinis are talking to this, they're talking to that, and they're all together.
Or
And if-
sometimes it's me, I'm out there and I got to run back. You know, I'm trying to get back to backstage and flip the lights off.
And how many times, Paul, just one more question.
Yeah, it's just like, yeah, it's great to see you. I got to kind of go right now. I got to get back to work. But I mean, hey,
But
you know,
maybe that's the magic of Claflin Hill.
and this past summer was also, by the way, the 30th season of Family Night at the Bandstand. And it's been a spectacular season. Our season finale is tomorrow night after this taping. You know, we came out of the 25th season relatively solvent right now. We're on an even keel going forward. And there's just such a sense of appreciation from our audiences, you know, in the parks. I mean, we were in Holliston the other night, and I had people coming up hugging me and saying, you know, this is just so amazing. Thank you. We just love this so
But
much.
you think about what you're offering the community. The tickets aren't very expensive to the summer concerts.
No, they're free.
Free is a good.
Well, they're
price.
not free to the sponsors, but
No, but I mean, realistically, for a family who wants to get out, enjoy an event as a family, if they're not very affluent, it doesn't matter.
no. And you know, case in point again, a person was at a concert we gave last week, Brass Attack. They do like Chicago Blood, Sweat and Tears, Tower of Power, kind of the horn band 70s funk rock kind of sound, and they're amazing. And at the end of the night, a lady came up to me, and she had her daughter with her, and she said, you know, I think maybe she can't make it this week, but she said, I just wanted to thank you because we have so looked forward to this as a family. Every Tuesday night, we've come to all of them. It's like, oh, are you from? She's like, we're from Upton, but we come over here every Tuesday night, and when you're playing somewhere else, we go follow that. And she said, can I give you a hug? It was like, yes, thank
Susan,
you.
look the other way.
Yeah, nah, you know, it's like, it's great. And you know, and then I go home and I think, wow, I'm going to work even harder. You know, this is great. It's just, you feel like everybody is on board with this, and it can't fail. It has to keep going, and it just needs to get going to a point that someday, when I can't do this anymore, that it's in a financial position where the next leader of Claflin Hill that they'll engage, whoever that might be, will actually, you know, be able to be engaged without saying, by the way, we can't pay you. You know, I mean, and you may have to cart all the equipment in too before the concert or something. You know, that's not going to fly. No one's going to sign up for that. But, you know, 25 years from now, you know, hopefully this has risen to that point where, like, some of those other more established orchestras, but yet we're still got the
But
soul of
Claflin Hill
Claflin
is
Hill.
part of Milford. I mean, you think about the equipment that you store at the town hall. It's not stored just for Claflin Hill.
No, I mean, and by the way, it doesn't really belong. It doesn't belong to me. I don't. Nothing in Claflin Hill belongs to me. You know, I'm basically like, you know, the proprietor of a small family business I started. You know, like, you know, Mr. Oliva or something, and have actually been successful
Paul,
in amassing
it's not
things.
every organization that would share with the Milford High School, with the chorus.
It's because Claflin Hill belongs to the community. You know, it's a nonprofit. It's not mine. It's all of ours. And so whatever we have, and when we're allowed to use this glorious space at Town Hall, and by the way, the Greater Milford Community Chorus, which has been in existence actually longer than the symphony, but they give their concerts at Milford Town Hall, and they use all of our equipment too as needed. And you know, I don't know if they're going to continue doing it, but Milford High School always gave a great spring pops concert at Town Hall, and you know, hey, the stuff's there.
But therein, your profound statement may explain why Claflin Hill is on season 26 when so many other orchestras haven't made it. You said it's part of Milford. It belongs to Milford.
Well, yes. And from your mouth to God's ears, I think is, or lips to God's ears. But I mean, you know, and, you know, by, you know, bringing that realization, everybody, also that, you know, I think actually I just said this on the radio this morning, you know, because our sponsor tomorrow night's Home Field Credit Union, who's one of our biggest corporate sponsors, and their representative came on the station, you know, on the interview with me this morning. Doug Lanzillo, he's a great guy, was just stepped down, did his year as Milford Rotary president too. And he was explaining that, you know, Home Field Credit Union and all credit unions are actually a membership banking institution. You know, when you bank at the credit union, you're actually a member of it, right? And which is that business model of credit unions. And it suddenly occurred to me, you know, as he's saying that, I said, Doug, you know, like what you just said actually applies to Claflin Hill too, because everyone who supports Claflin Hill by even just coming to a concert, even if it's a free concert at Town Park, you know, they're a member of Claflin Hill now. They're a participant, and they're an owner of Claflin Hill.
Well, I look forward to getting back together mid-season and hearing how the season's going and what's coming up for the rest of the year.
And I look forward to seeing you in the balcony on opening night, too.
There you go.
For the Dvorak. You know, you can revisit Dvorak now that you've become accustomed to it.
There you go.
Yeah.
To our 6 loyal viewers, it's hard to describe what a magic moment the holiday concert is, but what a special moment going to a Claflin Hill concert presents. Please look into it. Come participate. And as always, thank you to our 6 loyal viewers for joining us tonight. May God bless, and may tomorrow be a better night than tonight.
Thank you,
Thank
Al.
you.
God bless.
Not too long since I've been home, been running all my life just